Hi, I'm Rabbi Jeremy from Mahar, the Washington Congregation for Secular Humanistic Judaism, and this is the second in our series of 4 videos that will cover the high points and significant pieces of the Torah portions for the month of July 2020 that we ordinarily would have covered together as a Texts on Tuesday class, but because we are wanting to finish up Maimonides and make some adjustments to the schedule in order to do a really good deep dive into the material for the high holidays, that we're just changing a few things, and Maimonides will get finished this week, and this material will be up there for your use. And when we left off in the prior video, what we were talking about was Parshat Chukat and Parshat Balak, and the stories in Parshat Balak end with the story of Pinchas. Pinchas, we're told, is a priest, and he's responsible for killing an Israelite man and his Midianite wife. The Israelite man utters some kind of a curse that would get him the death penalty, and it's not clear what to do about the Midianite wife. Pinchas takes action and kills them both. And that's really where we're left with the narrative at the end of Parshat Balak. Parshat Pinchas picks that back up again. And because we talked in the prior video about the implications of that story about Parshat Pinchas, the idea that maybe the biblical text isn't very positive about intermarriage, and how our ideas as humanistic Jews have changed since then, and how Parshat Balak's approach is not the one that we use anymore, it makes sense to just kind of talk about the other stuff that happens in Parshat Pinchas. And there is some important stuff that happens in Parshat Pinchas. So in one important narrative, we get the story of the 5 daughters of Zelophechad. Zelophechad, we are told, is an Israelite man from the tribe of Manasseh. Manasseh is one of the 12 tribes of Israelites. And we are told that Zelophechad dies without sons. We're told that he dies not because he was involved in Korach's rebellion, not because he was involved with having decided not to cross into the land of Canaan when the spies went out with Joshua. We are told that he dies because he dies in his own sin, is the way the text describes it. But he has no sons, and so he has 5 daughters, and these 5 daughters are left behind without property. Culturally speaking, in the ancient Near East, this is not a good outcome for the daughters, because the daughters rely on having some amount of wealth in order to find men to marry. It's documenting events that, at least according to the Torah, are more than 3,000 years old. So we really do have to kind of understand the cultural context, even if we reject the assumptions behind the context. And the context they're living in is, for women to get married, they need to have some amount of property. These women want some amount of property, and they want to inherit their father's share in what the tribe of Manasseh possesses. And so they approach Moses and they say, our father died, he died in his own sins, he left no sons, we want to inherit. What do you want to do? And Moses goes and he consults, and he comes back and he says, you can inherit. And the women promise that they will not marry outside of their tribe. They will not marry outside the tribe of Manasseh. Their point is, we're trying to keep the property in the tribe, but we need to get married. This point is going to become important because the story of the daughters of Zelophechad is often interpreted as one that's kind of progressive for the time. It is kind of progressive for the time that women are allowed to own property. Certainly that women are allowed to inherit property. But it's not that progressive. And this is one half of the story of the daughters of Zelophechad. The other half of it is going to come in a later Torah portion. It's going to be really one of the last things that happens in the book of Numbers. And according to the book of Numbers at the end, the women's promise must have been doubted, because the men of the tribe of Manasseh come to Moses and say, you have to make them not marry outside the tribe. So whatever promise it was they made was clearly not trusted, according to the text of the Torah. So we have this story of the daughters of Zelophechad, and it's a warning about reading ourselves too much into the text. There are ideas in the Torah. There are ideas in the broader Tanakh. There are ideas in rabbinic literature that are kind of progressive for their time. But they're not progressive the way we mean progressive in every respect. And we have to be careful about not reading ourselves into the text. And this is an episode where we are tempted to read ourselves into the text until you look at the whole thing and you realize we can't read ourselves into the text, because nobody would expect among humanistic Jews for women to say we should inherit our father's property, A, because he had no sons, and that's the only reason we get to inherit, but then B, we're also going to not just marry other Israelites, but we're going to marry within our tribe. This is not a progressive piece of the story, and we should be aware of that. Another major part of Parshat Pinchas is that Moses is asked, because it's become clear according to the text of the Torah by this point, that Moses is not going to cross over into the land of Israel with the other Israelites. We've gotten a story already in the book of Numbers. When Miriam dies, Moses and Aaron are being yelled at by the Israelites because they don't have water. Moses appeals to God, and God tells him, okay, go out and talk to this rock. Speak to the rock will give you water. Moses instead strikes the rock twice with a stick. That was not what the instruction was, and so God, according to the Torah, tells Moses, well, you now are not going to go with the Israelites into the promised land. So we now get to the point where the Israelites demand to know who's going to lead them next. And the answer is Joshua, son of Nun, Joshua ben Nun. Joshua has been Moses's aide-de-camp, for lack of a better term, all the way through since the book of Exodus. So this is not a surprise. Joshua is the person who kind of warned Moses, bad things are happening in our camp during Exodus. Joshua is, according to the Torah, one of the only two Israelites who, when they went to spy out the land of Canaan and they come back, this is also earlier in the book of Numbers, we're told he's one of the only two Israelites who says, don't worry about the giants. We can deal with that. We should go. God is on our side. And so it's not a surprise to see that Joshua is going to be the next Israelite leader, but this is confirmation of that. And then the third episode that comes up in Parshat Pinchas, which is of a lot of interest to us, is we get a series of laws. Numbers, to a lesser extent than Leviticus, has a number of legal passages. And Numbers is giving us now, at this point, toward the end of Parshat Pinchas, is giving us a description of a sacrifice that's supposed to kind of always be happening at the temple or in the tabernacle, the Tamid sacrifice. It describes the Musaf sacrifice, which is an additional sacrifice that happens on major holidays. So the Musaf sacrifice would occur on Shabbat, it would occur on Passover and Sukkot and Shavuot, and it would occur on Rosh Hashanah and on Yom Kippur. The holidays that are designated as Shabbats, these are the holidays designated as Shabbats. So the Musaf sacrifice would occur then, and the Musaf service that happens in congregations with more traditional liturgical practices in the Jewish world, the Musaf service is a reflection of a preservation of the Musaf sacrifice after the destruction of the temple. So knowing about Musaf is useful for navigating Jewish environments. Then we get Rosh Chodesh, the start of the new month. And then we get some of the laws of Passover again. We get the sacrifices that are going to be offered on Passover in particular. And we get Shavuot. And we get Sukkot. And we get Shmini Atzeret, which is this 8th day of assembly that happens at the end of Sukkot, the purpose of which we have no real knowledge of. In other words, we get an Israelite calendar. We get a calendar all in one place, a full calendar that gives us, here are the major holidays, and here is what you do on these holidays, and here are the sacrifices to be offered, and the number of sacrifices to be offered, particularly on Sukkot, is stunning. But this is our calendar, finally. This is a consolidated calendar that we kind of recognize as a functioning, kind of complete Jewish calendar, right? It talks about what happens on days like Shabbat. It talks about Rosh Chodesh to mark off the months. It talks about Passover. It talks about Shavuot. It talks about Sukkot. It talks about Shmini Atzeret. We're getting the fuller picture of an Israelite calendar, which also means we're getting a calendar that's pretty late in Israelite history, because we're getting a calendar that's a little more clear about months. So the earliest Israelite calendars in other parts of the Torah say things like the first month of the year is the spring. And in the spring, you're going to have Passover on the 15th day of the month of Aviv, which just means spring. And then you have to figure out when Shavuot happens, and you get no useful coordinating of the date for Shavuot. 50 days after the Shabbat. Which Shabbat, right? Because Passover itself is considered a Shabbat. But then there's a Shabbat that happens in the middle of Passover. Is that the Shabbat that you mean? Do they have to overlap? What if they don't overlap? We don't have great calendaring up to this point. And then in Numbers, we get something that's a workable calendar that we can really use. Consolidation, simplification tends to tell you that something is later. And that fits with the stories about Parshat Pinchas, because the stories in Pinchas, the story about Pinchas killing the Israelite and his Midianite wife, speak about concerns that are later concerns, that they're post-Babylonian exile concerns about intermarriage and the effect of that on Israelite, which is by the time of Ezra, when some of these stories might date to, by the time we get to Ezra in the 390s, we're really talking about Second Temple Judaism. We're not really talking about Israelite religion anymore. So putting these concerns into Numbers suggests that some of these things, the consolidated calendar and the story about Pinchas and and the problem of foreign wives, tends to tell us that those things aren't original or pre-exilic stories, that they're a little bit later, that they're a little bit newer, that they reflect a consolidation of practice, that they reflect a concern about endogamy that doesn't seem to exist in other parts of the Torah. So that was Parshat Pinchas, which, even though we left out the second half of the story of Pinchas because we already talked about it, has a lot going on that's useful for us as humanistic Jews to know, so that we can understand where things come from, how things piece together, and what they might mean for how we approach the biblical text. Our next Torah portion will be Matot Maseh. These are another joint couple of Torah portions, and they will be the last Torah portions in the book of Numbers before we move on to the book of Deuteronomy.